Should be live. Hello, welcome to Consensus Layer Call, Upward Devs 120. This is issue 892 in the PM repo. I guess kind of as some of the last calls, dominantly just kind of checking in on Deneb, various things, testing, Devnet analysis. If there are other discussion points, let me know when we get to the open discussion. Okay, so first of all, I believe most of the Consensus Layers devs probably saw that their V140 beta 3 is out. In that is the mainnet KZG configuration, which is already baked into CKZG. So I don't think it's a much of a change for you to be able to use it. As well as an additional gossip condition that Enrico found. Essentially weren't properly bounding the blob index. It allows us to prevent spam of totally invalid messages from being passed around. The big shout out to Enrico on that. I think other than that, there are some additional tests, maybe a whisk update, but should be generally pretty good. And I believe that configuration is to be used in Devnet 10. Does Devnet 10 exist? Let's transition. Or any questions on the consensus specs release? All right, cool. Let's jump into Devnet update. First of all, does Devnet 10 exist? What's the status on that?
So we are waiting on client releases and some PRs to be merged, and we're hoping to launch tomorrow. Currently, the only image that we know that might work on Devnet 10 is Prism. No other EL or CL team has reported that they have a working image. Or a branch. Yeah, we don't need a full release, just a branch that we can use, that we can build a image off of.
What was that?
Are we supposed to use the new KCG setup for this DevNet?
Yes.
Yes.
So Golang clients cannot, unless we coordinate among Go KCG that hasn't included these changes, Get and Prism.
Okay, so it's not an outer kind of configuration. It has to be baked into Go KCG.
It's a problem with the way that we have dependencies. Get depends on Go KCG and Prism depends on Get. So the way this needs to be updated is Go KCG needs to first make the changes, then Get needs to point to a master branch in Go KCG, then Prism needs to point to that, and then Go KCG needs to make a release, Get needs to point to that release, and then Prism report needs to point to that.
Oh man.
Yeah, we probably need to solve this. This is not maintainable. Any change in Go KCG is a pain.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the major intentions of Devnet 10 is to use that setup. So I guess we're blocked. We could move forward and add Geth and Prism, but yeah.
For Aragon, we're also waiting on Go KZG release with the trusted setup.
Got it.
On the Lotus side and Ethereum J side, I will release the node bindings by tomorrow and try to integrate it. But I think even without all this, we have the flag to run with a custom trusted setup, right?
Yeah, so there's kind of two blockers right now for Devnet 10. The first one's the trusted setup, and the second one is the issues we saw on Devnet 9 yesterday. We can, of course, go ahead with Devnet 10 without acknowledging any of those issues. That would just basically be Devnet 9, but bigger. Or we could wait until we fix both of them and then start Devnet 10 at the cost of time.
These are the issues that Mario found in testing, and then escalated to test in the testnet environment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So these, we know they would be hit if we do send a certain series of bad and good blobs in relation to each other, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it wouldn't be hit
If we,
otherwise. Yeah, okay.
yeah, exactly.
Mario, do you want to give us a quick on that, please?
Yeah, of course. So basically, we are using the new tool that we are using on Hive. So this thing is like a proxy that sits in between the beacon node and the validator client. We set it up yesterday on a Devnet on a single client combination. So every time that this client combination proposed, what it did was basically just receive the unsigned block and blobs from the beacon node, and then it signed the block and the blobs, but it also created an extra seemingly valid blob. So the only difference between this blob and the correct blob is that the KCG was correct, the signature was correct, everything seemed correct, but it was broadcasted to a different peer. So basically, one peer had the correct blob with the correct KCG signature, and it can attest to the correct block, and the other one received this other incorrect blob. So what happened was, when the block was eventually broadcasted, the clients received the block, and the ones that received the incorrect blob, they were ignoring the correct blob. So at the end of the day, one side of the recipients that didn't prune the incorrect blob from their database, they will unable to follow the chain. This tool was configured this way, and it kept doing this every time there was a proposal from them. So this was what we were seeing yesterday on Devnet. We have a Hive test for this. It's reproducible, so the clients can, if they want, just run this as many times as they want. The Hive test is very simple. It does the same thing every single slot over the course of an epoch. If there are too many missed slots, the test will fail. So they can immediately know if they have fixed or not the issue.
This is really exciting that this is in Hive now. Enrico?
Just to clarify, you said that some clients have these blobs into database, but I guess this is incorrect. It should be in
That
some
might be
kind
more
of
of like
cache.
a cache, right? Yeah.
Right. So yeah, this is a thing that we discussed recently. So you kind of poison the client cache, and the client is not able to recover because it's not even trying to look up by root another time. Is this correct, Mario?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my understanding was different. I guess, yeah, I guess that is correct. Is cache, is not database.
Yeah, I mean, it's
because
persisted somewhere that prevents it from wanting to do the work again. Yeah, Potos?
I just want to mention that this abstraction is better persisted somewhere, because in Prism it is actually currently database. We're not using a cache.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, and from the perspective of the test and where it gets, both are coherent and make sense.
I think Tego is not affected by this. We fixed this recently, and basically we delete everything, and if the next block builds on top of the one that some of the network nodes seen as complete and good, we do then a lookup by root to everything. So we're gonna re-download block and blobs again, and we should be able to follow the chain with a bit of lag.
That makes sense. So you kind of protect yourself from doing way too much work in the single slot, but then use additional signal to catch up. Maybe. Okay. Mario, do you have, so now that we have this additional ability to test both on the testnet and inside of Hive. Do you have an updated list of what you intend to get there, such that maybe some of the devs here could take a look at it and add or modify in any case?
Yeah, of course. I have a list of the test cases that we are doing in Hive, which is basically related to the possibilities of the blobber. There's a list of actions that the blobber can do, and we can configure them in Hive. And this is basically the same thing that we are running on the Devnet. I can share the list. It's very simple. It's not very. There are not that many slot actions at the moment, but we can increase that if there are comments from the devs that the stuff that you guys want to test. We can also include them. I will share the list.
Cool. Again, this is awesome to get some basic networking testing in Hive. Enrico? Enrico, is your hand up?
Oh, sorry, I was in mute. Just want to also to mention what we discussed during a nice conversation with Mario, which is related to this latest thing that Mario was talking about. So is it another condition in which a proposer actually, so the proposer, if the block is not full of blobs, so there is still a room of 1 or 2 blobs there, so he could play with these 2 additional slot, kind of creating a blob that is invalid and still related to the block and the slot with an index that doesn't match any commitment in the block. So technically, the data is available because all the data that is required by the block is available, but has been seen by the node something additional that is incorrect, because for Teku is incorrect just because we saw a blob with an index that doesn't match to any commitment in the block. So what we do, and we do it on purpose, but I'm not sure if it is at the end is a flaw in the client. So we actually don't import the block, and
that seems
no. This is not. Yeah, this is not necessary. I think the blob would not be available in that case because it hasn't been committed to in the block. So
the block, but the block has
detect
everything it needs. So the block, you have to import the block, otherwise that's going to cause.
Yeah, I
potential
agree.
network
I
splits
agree.
for a
But
couple of them.
I would just want to respond to the concern that they get free data availability. They don't.
No,
because
they
it's
get,
not provable. There's nothing provable on chain that data was available.
Correct, but it can be passed around on the
provable,
P2P.
But to me,
so it's purely so they get like the proposer can like basically put some extra load on peer-to-peer. That is true, but they don't get any benefit from this.
And I believe,
and they get
that's
a
Enrico's
slight
point.
down. They get a slight downside, which is that their block is slightly less likely to confirm because they increase their orphan risk because it has competition with the other blobs. So I don't see any reason why any proposer would do this.
I don't think Enrico's trying to make a claim that there's free data availability. I think he's trying to make a claim they can induce load on the P2P, and if we're doing different import strategies on this, it can cause a network split. And it's really important that we don't do different strategies on this, and it's really important that we import even if you see invalid extraneous blobs, because somebody could easily not have seen those and do the import.
Right. What you could do is not attest to such blocks. That would be okay. But yeah, you should not, like on a node level, you should not exclude them from the block choice. Otherwise, you risk a split.
Well, I'm not saying that I'm not importing that anytime in the future. I'm just saying that I'm not importing that in that moment. So I'm gonna test on the previous head. But if the next block again builds on top of it, then we just look up by root the data that we need, and we actually
Mhm.
not even realize that there were an extra blob floating around because we are not even requesting for it. Probably not.
But we would at that point verify that all the blocks that are blocks that are referred are available. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean that seems okay, but maybe too much complication.
Yeah, a mixed strategy here is at least gonna like cause some clients to be more profitable than others in relation to such an error slash attack.
Yeah,
Because
but
some are gonna attack, like it depends on kind of if you sit on the majority or not in terms of the attestation on whether it's gonna come in or not. Like, so this is probably something that should at least have a note in the spec.
But I think like there is also well, assuming that there might be something malicious attached to this behavior, maybe there is no advantage to do that. But if Teku is the next proposer, we're gonna reorder that block. That's the thing. So if
Well, you're going to
you
attempt
can't.
to. It depends on the attestation, right?
If it has enough attestation, you can't. I would be much more careful with these things about reorging a block because you are interfering in the fork choice rule, and we don't want to normalize that. So anything like that, I feel like should actually be an agreement that we all have. Like I have a similar feeling about the other like reorg late blocks thing, that it was a bit too hasty to just say it's okay if some clients do that. Like it seems to me like something that affects the fork choice is something that we really need to have quite a strong agreement on that. We're okay with that. Because otherwise, anyone else will also think they can also interfere with the block choice and fork choice in such ways, and that's just not okay.
Okay, but
yeah, I agree.
But to Enrico, to your point, this is much more dangerous for the local client than even this other fork choice reorg for late blocks, because you make yourself blind to the block and unaware of even the probability in relation to what you assume is going to happen in relation to the attestations you've seen. By doing so it seems strictly worse than just having it in your view.
Yeah, and moreover, as we already know that probably we are the minority because we are probably the only one that does this. So if we know in advance this, so that much, yeah, there must be.
Right. I do think that a note about invalid blob sidecars in beyond the the highest index of the commitment in the block should not invalidate the block. I think just an explicit note about that is probably pretty important, such that anyone reading the spec doesn't accidentally put themselves in a forkable spot. Again, barring knowing network distributions, like not doing the import and then building upon what is prior and not having a view of attestations, seems strictly just more dangerous than doing the import and knowing the knowledge.
So this should be.
I also think this is much. So I also think this is much less important than like the late block reorg. At least like there is a gain that the proposer gets from this, which we kind of don't like, which is why we do want to we do kind of like punishing them in some way. Here there is no gain. There is a potential like slight load increase by a maximum of a factor of 2, which we kind of say is like at least as a temporary load is okay anyway, because that's just the maximum of blobs. And so like the attack vector seems very limited. Like basically, oh yeah, like nodes bandwidth requirements will go up, not even by a factor of 2. And yeah, you don't really get any gains from that. So like I would say do nothing is the best.
I think I generally agree. I do think that, I mean, anything in the play around additional blobs, these are just primarily like a vector for potential network splits, like sending invalid ones at the same time, sending ones in excess, and potentially like having people consider their block differently. Like these are all these all hinder your ability to get a block in, but become strategies for split views. Enrico?
And just another side comment. If this becomes something that we consider important, should we consider to introduce slashable events next fork at this point?
That would be the correct way if we're actually concerned about it, but it seems very excessive to me in terms of the extra risk it adds for the gain it provides here.
The potential slashable event becomes more valuable probably for sending conflicting blob commitments than sending these extraneous blobs. Sorry,
What would
blob
the
types.
conflicting?
So
Oh,
sending
for
to a valid and an invalid one for index 0.
Double signing,
right.
actually.
Right now, you just kind of have to just
Yeah.
have these like gossip conditions that try to do anti-DOS. We don't really have like a
Right.
crypto economic reaction to it because
Right.
the consensus doesn't know anything about these sidecars. I think it's certainly worth having the conversation.
If we can get both of these into one slashing condition, then it would be preferable, yes.
Well, and if we were prioritizing
But
one or the other,
I think
conflicting
slashing
one is much more
conditions
important.
are realistically very high cost. So in terms of like how deep the changes are, we have to touch the validator client, which we haven't really for a long time, and like what risks they add, how that changes the cost benefit analysis for stakers and so on. Like it's but yeah, I mean it's not out of the question.
I think the slashable condition have to be two, because there are slashable condition comparing two blobs, one blob with another blobs conflicting, and one is comparing a blob that is inconsistent with the corresponding block. So comparison between block and blobs, and comparison between blobs. So
You could
these are
both could potentially reduce to being inconsistent with the current block.
Yeah.
But that's a bit different, right? Like,
right.
So then basically the cost of sending conflicting position commitments is not sending a block, which is like, yeah, a big opportunity cost.
yeah, like the double signing is also much easier to like make sure you're not doing in the context of a validator client. Whereas like making sure your signing is correct in relation to something is much more difficult and likely for error.
Oh, right. I was thinking of going for the other one. I was thinking of only having it with respect to the correctness with respect to the block.
Yeah, but that's intuitively a much more difficult thing for the small validator client to get correct.
Yeah. Right.
I think that it's, you know, there's some read on here on like slashing versus not, and some desire to do so and not. It's certainly a worthwhile exploration, but I don't think it's something we need to continue on the conversation today. Certainly when we had these conversations in Austria and after around blob decoupling, we did make the decision around using essentially our P2P, anti-DOS, and peer scoring conditions to handle this. Obviously, if we've gotten more information around some of the issues and concerns here, we could escalate it to essentially to a crypto economic condition. But well, you do get the block eventually. Protos.
Yeah, I'm just talking about this thing of the peer scoring. We cannot downscore the peer that is giving us these bad blobs because we haven't got the block to check this. So this is the real problem here, that we have someone that is actively malicious and we cannot penalize it because when we find out that he was malicious, we already lost who this guy was.
Well, you could also track the peer that's sending you, but you could receive things from two different peers. So even if you track who is the sender of a given message, then you end up in the same situation. Yeah, I agree.
Right. Okay. So in two relations, like the peer scoring in a lot of these scenarios is not possible, but the anti-DOS conditions combined with the fact that it's not incentive compatible to get your block in is kind of what we're relying on here. You know, if you send a bunch of these messages, it's very likely you just increase the likelihood of orphaning your block at the potential gain of view splits and compounding things in relation to view splits for gain. So like that's kind of the trade-off space here without adding a slashing condition. I can make an issue around this and toss it in the Electra tracker, and it's something that we could potentially talk about as we move into that conversation. Are people comfortable with that, or is it something we need to continue to hammer on right now? Mario.
Yeah, so Potus, you mentioned that you want this documented. Where do you want for us to document this? What's the best place to document this for you?
Oh, any place is fine. I think we're all in Discord. Whatever you put the few lines just to make sure that I understood the problem correctly. But it seems to me that Tech1 and Prism are acting exactly the same way. That also seems to me to be the incorrect way.
Yeah, I think we can discuss on the issue that Danny is about to open, so we can maybe define the thing.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make an issue around the potential trade-offs around, you know, the DOS conditions here and slashings for a future conversation. I will make a PR about a note about not invalidating blocks if you see invalid sidecars in excess of the index in the block. In that PR, we can talk about if we want more explicit guidance than that. Cool. And I'll share both on Discord so that people are aware once I pop them in there. Okay, let me take a quick note about getting both of these in. Okay, cool. Duncan, it might be worth at least putting your thoughts in the chat in relation to Potos' recent question. Okay, so we do have Devnet 9 currently. We're marching towards Devnet 10 with some of these known blockers. And Gojinder, you had some sort of analysis in relation to Lodestar and Devnet 9 on Twitter the other day. I didn't realize until you put the comment up this morning. Would you mind going through that and giving us some context?
Yep. So I basically last weekend when the
do you want to
blobs
share your screen? I guess once you get to that point, or share a link. Okay, thanks.
Is it coming through?
Yes.
Okay, so over the weekend when blobs were being spammed in the Devnet 9, So I collected some data around God-safe arrivals of full block plus blobs. So basically, the blocks having 1 blob, 2 blob, 3 blob, 4 blob, 5 blocks having 1 blob, 2 blob, 3 blob, 4 blob, 5, 6 blobs. And so these timings are pre any validation done on them. And what I did was basically then plotted a histogram and as well as the percentile scores. And basically, this graph shows that how drastically blob where there are 6 blobs in the block, how drastically basically those arrival times are quite late. So if we look at this matrix, which is the percentile scores of how when the blob and blocks are fully available, and so even though these numbers look small because it takes no time to produce a block on Devnet 9 because these are the only transactions that were being bundled over there. So we can see that blob, where blob is equal to 6, it introduces quite a large amount of latency, and we can also assume that all these nodes are in the same data center, so that latency is still not factored in. And basically this leads to my projection.
What projection?
So wait a second. I am not able to move this bar.
Are these so this is import time. This is when the block is actually recognized. Is there any significant delay from seeing them on the network?
Yeah. So 1 second, I'll just take you over the projections. So these are the blob projections that, what I did was I took a Lodestar node for the mainnet and basically calculated its percentile scores for various arrivals of the block. And the column that you see for blob is equal to 0, those are the actual percentile scores that my node saw for using Lodestar. And then I added the diffs of the latency that I got there from with respect to the baseline blobs is equal to 0 to give a naive projection. So if I add the extra latency that has been introduced, and if I look at this 95 percentile score,
Sorry, what do you add it to? What do you add your latency to?
I add my latency to the current latency of blocks that I see on my node.
That doesn't seem like the correct thing to do though, because like there are things happening concurrently here. Like these blobs are not, it's not like once your node has done everything that it does now they propagate the blobs.
Right, but if we look at the so what I have done is that these scores are with respect to the actual blobs latency that is observed on Devnet 9. So blobs is equal to 0 is basically when you see a block with no blobs, and if there is a significant diff between blobs is equal to 0 and blobs is equal to 6, that means that increasing the number of blobs is adding to the latency.
And this is pure network latency. This is not considering any validation
right now,
plus block import, right?
Correct.
Wait, so that's what confused me. That's what I just asked. If this is after this measures when you actually import, like when your client actually says everything is done now, I have a block, or is it when you saw them on the network?
Is as soon as my node saw this, and this is pre-processing.
Right.
So that's what I did. Basically, I added latency to the actual latency that my node is seeing, and did a naive projection.
I do not understand why the blobs are arriving after the block then, because we're propagating everything in parallel.
So so blocks can arrive at, or it's can arrive before or at anywhere between or after. I mean, it's not really following a particular order. But what I'm saying is that, so blobs is equal to 0 is the baseline that I am matching with the latency that I'm seeing on the mainnet today. And whatever is the diff, for example, blobs is equal to 6 minus blobs is equal to 0. So whatever is the diff, I added the diff. So basically I added the extra latency introduced in my projections. I mean, it's a naive way to do it, but that's what I did.
Okay, I would like to, because something like, I mean, Ansgar already commented in the thread, these are more than the mainnet latencies we saw from actually just adding extra data to the block. So it feels like something can't be right about this.
Granted,
if we say,
these are 95 and 98%.
Right, I know. I agree.
Which some,
It's
I mean,
much
the
smaller than
tail
some
on some of
blocks.
the mainnet, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, some other client, I can't claim that this analysis is comprehensive because obviously it has not been done over multiple nodes and multiple network conditions. But yeah, some other client team can sort of re-verify and recheck all this. That would be nice.
I do think it would definitely be valuable to get such data from another client. I mean, we did see with our mainnet experiments with using these kind of events, some wide disparities across clients. But yeah, I also, Docker, I'm not 100% sure that like these tails are much different than what we saw in mainnet, because we do have, tails in excess of, the 4 seconds, but in by and large, in most cases, seeing them pre 4 seconds.
We didn't see large drop adaptations though, which like if we saw this beyond 4 seconds, we would have seen, like not at below 1 megabyte blocks.
Right.
So it doesn't feel like this data can be correct, is my feeling. I mean, I'm happy to recheck what exactly I felt we saw, like what we had there. We still, I think we can still find the dashboards, but like I feel like the way of computing this is overly pessimistic, because it seems like it makes the assumption that blobs are not propagated in parallel in a way.
I mean, it's not really making that assumption, because what it's doing is that it's actually comparing the data that the node is seeing on blobs is equal to 6, and comparing it.
So what is the baseline latency on this test net for blobs that are with blocks with 0 blobs? What's the baseline latency? Because you said you normalized it to 0 seconds.
Yeah. So baseline is present in the data itself, and I think 1 second. So you get 95 percentile within half a second, and then you get 98 percentile with 0.65 seconds.
Right, which is much slower than mainnet. Which you kind of have to take into account, because like this time is still available on mainnet to propagate blocks. Like if this is like, I don't know, 2 seconds or 3, I don't know what the exact number is on mainnet, then like during this time, blobs can still propagate, assuming mainnet is not saturated with like in bandwidth.
No, if you
I don't
look
know
at
if you see what I mean.
the analysis that I have done on some of the mainnet blocks, for example, Lodestar, based on, so I have done these kind of analysis, and I see that, generally the proposal is published after 2 seconds, because by 1.5 seconds you get blocked from either execution or from the MEV MEV itself, and then basically you sign it and then you propagate it. So by the time you end up propagating, it's already more than 2+ seconds, and that is what Lodestar node also shows that that is the latency that the Lodestar node is seeing on the mainnet blocks.
Yeah.
So I mean, whatever. So right now in this particular Devnet 9, we can assume that all that time is squished to 0 or is squished to whatever blobs is equal to 0. So whatever is the additional latency will definitely add up when the blobs will also surface on mainnet. I mean, this is
I
my
think I strongly disagree with that statement. You cannot just add this when we're like explicitly doing things in parallel. It's not like, because what you're saying is basically, oh, like currently blocks take 3 seconds to propagate, and now we're adding the blobs, and that's another like 1 second or something. When in reality, all of them start at time 0, and yes, the blocks takes longer, and maybe the blobs take longer, but they're still in parallel, so you still can't add these things.
Are you sure they start at second 0, Dankrat? Because most blocks come from the builder, and I don't know how the builder path is going to be on disseminating blobs. There's a big latency now in actually negotiating with the builder. So if the builder actually is going to be starting to send the blobs later, then I think your point is no longer valid.
That I agree with. And we can also, like, it might be possible that people are playing latency games already. Like, I mean, well, we very likely know that some people are. But these are economically incentivized. So these people will, if they see that now they're missing blocks because they're sending blocks late, they will just have to like decrease their latency. If it's that.
And to be fair, like the difference between
technical negotiation process, then I agree with you. But it doesn't feel to me like that takes 2 seconds.
Well,
that seems very unlikely.
And there might be some fixed latency added from there, but that's not the same as the latency added from the parallelization of the network dissemination.
Yeah, so towards that argument where we are saying that, you know, the blobs should alive parallel, but that is not something that we are seeing in Devnet 9 because there is a huge disparity in latency between blobs is equal to 0 blocks and blobs is equal to 6 blocks. So maybe we need to look at the clients, or, you know, we need to look at the implementations where the blobs are not being transmitted in parallel, or they are being transmitted one by one. I think so. It would be, yes, definitely nice whether a second client can sort of confirm my observations, and it would be nice if all the blocks, if there is a very little discrepancy between blobs is equal to 0 and blobs is equal to 6 column in Devnet 9 itself, then I can sort of agree with you that things will happen in parallel and it will not really add to a different latency number over there.
I don't think Dr. point is that there won't be additional latency for full gathering of information if you have, 3 versus 6, but that it shouldn't necessarily be like a strict like linear relationship.
Yeah, just adding it just seems overly pessimistic. That's what I say.
Right. It might be, but we should basically do an experiment and sort of figure this out. I think at least that this experiment warrants at least this much.
Right.
I agree, especially getting another client to gather similar data, and for those that are gathering it to think about, if the current presentation and extrapolations make sense, or if we want to modify some of that. Enrico?
Yeah, currently Teku is not able to show the arrival time of the gossip message, the actual one. So we are adding a little bit of latency there, but we are working on gathering the exact arrival of the message down from the P2P layer. I don't know if there are some other clients that are currently better showing these arrival times.
And Pawan said he's going to try to gather some data on Lighthouse by tomorrow, which is great. Are we still spamming blobs though in the same way on Devnet 9, or do we need to turn that back on for this data analysis, data gathering?
I don't think we have Blobber running right now. We turned it off because Prism had
No, that's not Blobber. We have Marius's transaction flop spammer running.
Alright, is Prism still borked?
Yes.
Okay, so probably
But
be good to
I'm-
get Prism back into the fold so that.
I just
the mesh
updated
looks
Prism Get
similar.
1, so I'll have a
I
look
think
at
if
how
you
that
run
is.
that PR, it should be fine.
Yeah, I
Alright,
just
cool.
ran it on Prism Get 1. I'm validating if it's fine, and if it is, then I'll run it on the rest of them.
You also
Alright,
need
cool.
to
So-
resync the DB.
I don't think so, because we never imported those blocks. So it's gonna remove the blobs from the DB.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Unless, yeah. But we need to do that for initial syncing, right?
Yeah, that's probably right.
I mean, you can SSH into Prism Get 1 and have a look at what it's doing.
That sounds good. I will look into this.
Another thing, we can still gather some data from Teku, maybe are not super accurate, but could be worth to have. So when you run Perry this session, if we can enable those famous logs, maybe you can ping me, and so I can grab all these logs and already have some toolings and scripts that crunch this data and put it in a spreadsheet, so we can do some analysis on our side as well.
Yeah, sure, I can run that. But in the meantime, do have a look at the Grafana dashboard here, if it's something we can modify in the dashboard directly, because we're listening to the event stream and we're adding how long blob sidecars are taking to propagate and how long the blob associated with a block has taken to propagate as seen by each of these nodes.
Okay, any amount of additional data and additional perspective on how to parse this data would be super valuable. I would recommend, in the event that we do collect a bit more data, to pop this on the ACDE call for at least a quick look next week, if we do have additional data to look at, because obviously safety of propagation of data in a relatively small environment is very important. Any other comments on Blob data load in relation to devnets or testnets or mainnet before we move on today? Great. Thank you, Gozinder. Let's see. So generally, the big things to further talk about, if anyone has anything, or anything in relation to DevNet, anything in relation to testing, anything in relation to the NEB for today.
Just wanted to clarify the conditions for DevNet 10 right now. Do we just wait for the trusted setup file, and as soon as everyone's updated that, we roll out DevNet 10, or do we want to wait for further changes on collecting data on DevNet 9 or figuring out a slashing condition or whatever it is?
No, so definitely on slashing conditions, where that is not part of the DNEB conversation currently. As for the clarification around invalid blobs in excess of the index and the block, that will be like a probably small conversation in the specs repo that might modify a little bit of behavior in some of these extraneous scenarios, but I don't think we need to wait on that. I would want to see a fixed Prism, which it seems like we're on the border of having that. So I would put the main blockers on getting the setup in place everywhere, and making sure Prism works over the next hour.
Sounds good.
In order to have a launch tomorrow for Devnet 10, we would need to have working branches for most clients, though. Is that something that we could get done probably by end of today? So we can start testing tomorrow?
Yeah, for Lighthouse, we can do that.
It looks that for Prism is going to be very easy. Light Client already posted a branch with the changes needed. Our changes are very small.
Okay, can anyone not meet that?
Could all the client teams please leave a comment in interop regarding which branches we should use or which latest images we should use? Then we can start working on it tomorrow morning and possibly make a launch around noon or 1 p.m. Central European time.
And sorry, a question about trusted setup, because I mean we could have an Aragon version without waiting for a Go KZG release, but I would prefer a Go KZG release so that we can switch to a released version of Go KZG for the trusted setup.
I don't think Go KCG can release. I don't know if Gav is here, but he was explaining that if Go KCG releases, then it would break Gav until Gav actually points to the new changes.
So there is some kind of weird like infinite dependency between Go KZG and Geth.
So the problem is that Golang is going to think that there are breaking changes, and it's going to pull. If you update Go KCG, then with a release, then if you download Geth, Golang is going to pull the new changes from Go KCG, and those are actually breaking changes.
How did it?
This in turn also breaks Prism.
We had the other trusted setup. How did that work?
I'm sorry?
We had a previously working trusted setup. That was not the real data, and that did not break anything. So how did that work?
Yeah, but the thing is that now these changes are actually breaking changes, but Golang, since they're both pre-version 1, Golang will not recognize them as breaking changes, and it will automatically update for the new release. So anyone that downloads the Geth repo and tries to build is going to build a broken client. Geth, there's a channel. I'll link a discussion in the RNG with an explanation from Kev.
It sounds strange to me because in Go you typically you can fix a specific version of your dependencies in Go mode, right? So that's I don't quite understand why you can't do that with Prism or
yes,
Geth.
you can, but that's the thing that then we need to coordinate the 3 clients to actually have these changes.
But does Go KZG depend on Geth or Prism? Still, okay.
No, it's the other way around. But yeah.
Okay, can we take any additional particulars around this dependency issue outside of the call?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, anything else on Deneb today? All right, any other discussion points on anything today? All right, get those images and branches to Barnabas and the DevOps team, and we'll keep moving. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
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 Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.